Prey. Prey 2017 is an underrated gem that nails the balance between atmosphere, storytelling, and gameplay. You're on a space station called Talos, and things go south fast when a shape-shifting alien species, the Typhon, breaks loose. From there, it's all about survival, but in a way that lets you approach every situation how you want. What makes Prey stand out is how it constantly makes you think. It's not just about shooting aliens, it's about figuring out how to use the environment, your tools, and even alien powers to get through. You can hack doors, sneak past enemies, or straight up blast your way through, but each path feels like a meaningful choice, not just another playstyle. And let's talk about the glue cannon, easily one of the most inventive weapons in a game. It's not just for combat, you can use it to reach high places or block off enemies, and it never stops being fun to mess with. Talos itself is basically a character in this game. The level design is incredible. This sprawling, interconnected space station feels alive, like a place people actually lived and worked. Every room tells a story, and uncovering the lore behind the experiments and the people who were there is half the fun. There's this constant feeling of isolation and tension, but it's never overwhelming. Instead, it keeps you on your toes, making every discovery more rewarding. So if you're into immersive, clever gameplay with a lot of freedom, Prey is absolutely worth picking up. It's one of those games that sticks with you long after you're done.
Even one breaks containment. We're all lost.
Soma. Soma is a horror game that gets under your skin in ways you don't expect. On the surface, it's a sci-fi survival horror set in an underwater research facility where things have clearly gone very wrong. But what sets Soma apart from other horror games is its focus on psychological terror rather than jump scares. It's the kind of game that leaves you thinking long after you've finished. You play as Simon, a guy who wakes up in this eerie, submerged facility with no idea how he got there. As you explore, you start to unravel a story that digs into heavy themes like consciousness, identity, and what it really means to be human. The questions it raises are unsettling in a way that sticks with you, especially as the lines between human and machine start to blur. Now, don't expect traditional combat here. Soma isn't about fighting monsters, it's about surviving them. You'll spend a lot of time sneaking around, hiding, and figuring out how to move forward without getting caught. And trust me, the atmosphere is thick. The underwater setting, combined with the oppressive sound design, makes everything feel claustrophobic and tense. It's not just a horror game, it's a smart, emotional experience that challenges your mind while keeping you on edge the whole time. If you're into atmospheric, story-driven games that mess with your head, Soma is absolutely worth your time. Lost in Random. Lost in Random is one of those games that feels like a dark fairy tale come to life. Imagine if Tim Burton teamed up with a game studio and you'll get a sense of its vibe. You play as Even, a girl in a twisted world where every decision is left up to the roll of a dice. The story kicks off when her sister, Odd, is taken away by the evil queen and Even sets out to save her, guided by a literal sentient dice companion named Dicey. The game is quirky, but in a way that's completely engaging. The combat is a mix of real-time action and deck building. You roll dicey in battle, and based on the result, you get different abilities from your card deck, ranging from summoning weapons to slowing down time. It's unpredictable, but that's the point. You never know exactly what you'll have to work with, and that keeps the fights fresh. Visually, Lost in Random is stunning in a weird, almost unsettling way. The world is divided into 6 realms, each inspired by a different side of a dice, and they all have this eerie stop-motion animation feel. The art direction alone is enough to make you want to keep exploring just to see what strange and wonderful things you'll come across next. The charm of the game lies in its oddball characters and the unpredictable nature of everything. It's got this whimsical, gothic tone that makes every corner of the world feel like it's hiding something strange and wonderful. If you're into unique worlds and inventive gameplay, Lost in Random is a hidden gem that's definitely worth your time. Mad Max. Mad Max delivers exactly what you'd expect from a game set in its brutal, post-apocalyptic world chaos, survival, and vehicular mayhem. You're playing as Max, a lone wanderer just trying to survive in the wasteland, and it nails that gritty, desperate feeling right from the start. What really stands out is how much time you'll spend building and upgrading your car, the magnum opus. This isn't just your ride, it's your lifeline. You'll scavenge for parts, tune it to your style, and use it to tear through enemy convoys or outrun bandits in the middle of the desert. The world itself is harsh, but stunning in its desolation. It's not lush or colorful, but that's the point. The wasteland is a barren, sand-covered world with ruins of the old civilization scattered around, and you'll be picking through them to survive. The open world feels massive, and while it can feel a bit empty at times, it only adds to that lonely, desolate atmosphere the Mad Max universe is known for. Combat is a mix of brutal hand-to-hand fighting and intense vehicle battles. On foot, Max isn't invincible, you've got to be smart with your resources and pick your battles, but when you're in your car, that's when things get wild. You'll ram enemy vehicles off cliffs, blast them with harpoons, and engage in some of the most satisfying car combat in gaming. The sheer weight and destruction of these battles make every encounter feel impactful. If you've ever wanted to feel like you're surviving in a true wasteland, Mad Max does a great job of capturing that vibe. It's not the most complex game out there, but it delivers on the sheer, gritty spectacle of the Mad Max world. The Forgotten City.
But I never could save these people.
The Forgotten City is a brilliant narrative-driven mystery that sneaks up on you with its depth. What started as a Skyrim mod evolved into a fully fledged game with a story that's way more compelling than you'd expect. You're thrown into an ancient Roman city trapped in a time loop where the entire population is bound by one rule: if even one person sins, everyone dies. Your job. Figure out who's going to break that rule before it happens. The game is all about exploration and dialogue, but not in a way that feels tedious. Every conversation you have peels back another layer of the city's secrets, and the way the time loop works means you're constantly rewinding, trying new approaches, and using the knowledge you've gained to change the future. The loop never feels repetitive though, because each run gives you new tools to solve the puzzle. It's more of a mental chess game than anything else.
Everyone will die.
What sets the Forgotten City apart is the moral dilemmas it throws at you. The people in the city aren't just NPCs with fetch quests, they're fully fleshed out characters with real stakes in this strange situation. You'll have to navigate tough choices that challenge your own ideas of right and wrong, and sometimes even your best intentions might lead to unexpected consequences. The setting itself is gorgeous too. Walking through the ancient city feels like stepping into a living museum, and the way the narrative ties into philosophy, history, and myth adds layers that you don't often see in games. The Forgotten City isn't just a mystery game, it's a thoughtful, well-written experience that'll make you question more than just whodunit if you're into games that respect your choices and make you think this one's worth every minute.
Salve, friend.
Hi-Fi Rush. Next up is Hi-Fi Rush, and this game is proof that a unique art style can be way more important than some hyper-realistic graphics. Seriously, Hi-Fi Rush doesn't care about looking like the real world, it's all about style, and it does it so well. The game is this colorful, rhythmic blend of action and music that just feels fun to play. It's almost like you're inside an animated music video with every punch and jump syncing up to the beat. And let me tell you, the experience is so satisfying you'll forget all about wanting realistic visuals. What Hi-Fi Rush nails is the connection between gameplay and art direction. Everything's so vibrant with bold colors and sharp, comic-like animations that bring the world to life. The art doesn't try to mimic real-life physics or lighting, it's designed to create a mood, and it absolutely works. There's a personality here that you don't get from most games trying to be the next big thing in realistic graphics. Instead of pouring resources into rendering pores or individual hairs, Hi-Fi Rush uses its art to amplify the rhythm, making the gameplay feel more alive. And here's the thing, none of that would have been better with ultra-realistic visuals. In fact, the stylized look makes it feel fresh and fun, something that stands out from the usual games aiming for gritty realism. It shows you that creativity, when used right, can be more engaging than technical perfection. What really sticks with you about Hi-Fi Rush isn't how real it looks, but how damn fun it is to play. The art style and the gameplay work together to create a vibe, and that's what matters most. This game proves that we don't need to chase photorealism when we can have something this unique and enjoyable. Before your eyes.
Every time that you blink, you're gonna jump forward in time.
Before your eyes is one of those emotional, unique experiences that hits you hard and fast. The game's main hook is that you control it by blinking, literally using your webcam. Every time you blink, the story jumps forward in time. It's a simple mechanic, but it's incredibly effective, especially given the game's focus on memory and regret. You play as a recently deceased soul looking back on your life. Each blink skips you through important moments from childhood to adulthood, and it's crazy how quickly these moments pass by, just like real life. The story digs deep into themes of family loss and the choices we make, things that are super relatable, which makes the emotional hits land even harder.
It's Chloe, your neighbor.
The gameplay is straightforward, with most of the interaction coming from the blinking mechanic, but that's where the brilliance lies. It forces you to let go, to accept that you can't hold on to moments forever, even the ones you wish would last. It's short, maybe a couple of hours, but in that time it manages to tell a full, heartfelt story that sticks with you long after it's done. No filler, just a tight, emotional narrative wrapped in a truly original gameplay mechanic. If you're looking for something that's more of an emotional experience than a traditional game, Before Your Eyes is a must-play.
Ready to come up here? That's just how this thing works.
Call of Juarez Gunslinger.
Making my way past the Castle of Fallen.
Call of Juarez Gunslinger is one of those games that knows exactly what it's doing and just has fun with it. It's a fast-paced, over-the-top Wild West shooter, but what really sets it apart is how it tells its story. You play as Silas Greaves, an old bounty hunter telling tales of his legendary exploits, and the whole game is framed as him recounting these stories in a saloon. What's cool is that Silas is kind of an unreliable narrator, so the story can change on the fly, sometimes literally. 1 second you're in the middle of a shootout, and the next, the environment shifts or enemies pop out of nowhere because Silas forgot to mention them. The gunplay is where the game shines. It's all about quick reflexes, racking up combos, and pulling off slick headshots in slow motion. It's super satisfying, especially when you get into the flow of it. The duels are a highlight too. You're not just mindlessly shooting, there's a tension to drawing your gun at the perfect moment, and when you nail it, it feels awesome.
Man, that you killed her. In a fair
What I really liked is how the game doesn't take itself too seriously. The tone is light and full of Western cliches, but in a fun way. It's all exaggerated, from the insane number of outlaws you gun down to the larger-than-life characters you meet or shoot along the way, like Billy the Kid and Jesse James. It feels like you're playing through a comic book version of the Old West, with every moment turned up to 11. Call of Juarez Gunslinger isn't long, but it packs in a lot of fun in its short runtime. It's one of those games where you just want to keep replaying certain sections, because the combat is so satisfying. If you're looking for a game that's all about stylish, arcade-style shooting with a quirky twist on storytelling, this one's definitely worth your time.
Making my way past the Castle of Fallen.
The Surge. The Surge is one of those games that came out of nowhere for me, but man, if you're into the Souls-like genre, this one brings something fresh to the table. Set in a dystopian future where corporations are running wild, you play as Warren, a guy who starts out in a wheelchair but soon gets outfitted with this exosuit that turns him into a walking tank. The game takes that Dark Souls formula hard as nails combat, brutal enemies, and a deep sense of exploration, but adds a unique twist with its sci-fi setting and the whole limb targeting system. That's one of the coolest parts about the Surge. Instead of just whacking away at enemies, you can target specific body parts. Want that shiny new arm piece your enemy's wearing? You have to literally cut it off in combat and salvage it. It adds a layer of strategy to the fights, because you're not just trying to survive, you're also constantly thinking about how to upgrade your gear and take advantage of enemy weaknesses. The world of The Surge is grim, and while it's mostly industrial factories and rundown facilities, it fits the tone perfectly. You're exploring this corporate hellscape full of killer robots, rogue security systems, and other exosuit-wearing maniacs. And yeah, it's tough. If you're not paying attention, enemies will wreck you. But the game rewards patience and precision, so when you finally take down a tough boss or get past a tricky area, it feels earned. One thing I'll say is that The Surge can feel a bit repetitive, especially with its environments and some of the enemies, but the combat is what keeps it interesting. If you're into challenging, methodical gameplay with a sci-fi twist, this one is definitely worth checking out. It's not as polished as some other games in the genre, but it's got enough unique ideas to stand on its own. The Council.
Lord Mortimer asked me to join him.
The Council is one of those hidden gems that more people should have picked up. It's like a narrative-driven detective game, but with this cool RPG twist. You play as Louis de Richet, who is invited to a secret island by a mysterious political group in the late 1700s. The game throws you right into a world of conspiracies, historical figures, and crazy mind games.
Please.
What sets the Council apart is how it handles choices and dialogue. It's not just about picking a response and watching things play out. You actually use skills to manipulate people, gather info, and push the story in different directions. Every choice feels weighty, and depending on how you build your character, you'll solve problems in different ways. It's not like most narrative games where you're just along for the ride here. You really shape how things play out.
And secrecy are both pillars of the organizations for which we work.
You know, Louis, I've only just now realized that I've been drawn here.
Days Gone. Days Gone is one of those games that didn't get the love it deserved when it first dropped, but man, it's way better than people give it credit for. You play as Deacon St. John, a biker turned drifter in a post-apocalyptic world overrun by freakers, basically zombies, but more intense. It's a mix of open world exploration, survival, and some really personal storytelling. What makes Days Gone special is the world. The Pacific Northwest setting is stunning, and the dynamic weather and day-night cycles actually impact how you play. Freakers are more aggressive at night, and the weather can mess with how you handle both them and the human enemies you face. The game keeps you on your toes, and traveling through the world on your bike adds a cool, unique layer to it all. Your bike isn't just for show, it's essential for survival, and you're constantly upgrading and maintaining it. The story is deeper than it looks at first glance. Sure, it's a post-apocalyptic zombie game, but Deacon's journey is about more than just survival. It's about loss, grief, and hope. The relationship between Deacon and his wife Sarah is at the core, and you're constantly learning more about what happened to her. The game hits some emotional beats, especially when it digs into Deacon's past and how he's coping with the world around him.
Dig, bro. And I know what kind of man.
Combat and stealth are solid, but what really stands out are the freaker hordes. These aren't your typical slow zombies. They come at you in massive groups, and if you're not prepared, they'll overwhelm you fast. Taking on a horde is a mix of strategy, planning, and straight up panic, and it's one of the most intense parts of the game. Days Gone may have launched with some bugs, but it's since been patched up, and what you're left with is an open world game that's way more engaging than a lot of people realize. It's got heart, solid gameplay, and a world that feels dangerous but alive. If you skipped it, it's definitely worth revisiting. The Order 1886. The Order 1886 is a game that got a lot of flack when it first released, but honestly, it's way more underrated than people give it credit for. Set in an alternate Victorian London, the game throws you into a world where steampunk tech meets Arthurian legend. You play as Sir Galahad, part of an elite group known as the Order, tasked with keeping the peace and battling half-breed werewolves and other supernatural threats. What stands out immediately is the visuals. This game looks incredible even years later. The graphics are cinematic, the lighting is stunning, and the attention to detail in the environments is insane. It feels like you're playing a high-budget movie, and the world they've built has so much depth. The alternate history vibe, mixed with the steampunk gadgets and tech, gives the whole thing a really cool, unique atmosphere. But yeah, people criticize it for being too short, and sure, it doesn't have a huge runtime, maybe 6 to 7 hours, but what's there is solid. The story dives into conspiracy, betrayal, and mythology, and while it's pretty linear, it keeps you hooked from start to finish. The combat is your standard cover-based third-person shooting, but with some slick weapons like the thermite rifle, which lets you burn enemies in clouds of flames. Where the Order 1886 shines most is in presentation and world building. The lore is rich, and it's clear the developers were laying the groundwork for a bigger universe. It's just a shame we didn't get a sequel because there's so much potential in this world. So yeah, it's not perfect, but the Order 1886 is way better than it gets credit for. If you're into cinematic games with a strong atmosphere and tight storytelling, it's definitely worth checking out, even if just for the experience. Sleeping Dogs. Sleeping Dogs is one of the most underrated open world games out there. It's basically a love letter to Hong Kong action films, with you playing as Wei Shen, an undercover cop trying to take down the triads from the inside. The story is a solid mix of crime drama and personal stakes, with Wei constantly balancing his duty as a cop and his loyalty to the people he's infiltrated. What really sets Sleeping Dogs apart from other open world games is the combat. It's got a slick hand-to-hand system that's more like a martial arts brawler than your standard shootout fest. Think Batman Arkham style, but with a focus on brutal takedowns and environmental attacks. You're slamming guys into fish tanks, car doors, and pretty much anything that's lying around, and it never gets old. The driving is also top-notch. Hong Kong is your playground, and the game gives you a ton of vehicles to mess around with. There's this cool action movie feel to the way chases are handled, where you can hijack cars mid-drive or shoot out tires in slow motion. It keeps things fast-paced and fun.
Holy shit, Tyler, what the fuck? Drive! Wait, drive!
What a lot of people miss about Sleeping Dogs is the story depth. It's not just about taking down a crime syndicate, it's about identity, loyalty, and how far you'll go before you lose yourself. Wei's journey is compelling because he's constantly torn between his undercover mission and the brotherhood he's building with the gang. It's got some real emotional moments that catch you off guard, and the setting Hong Kong feels alive. The city's bustling with activity, from neon-lit streets to shady back alleys. It's one of the few games where the location feels like a character itself, with all the food stands, street vendors, and cultural details adding to the immersion. If you slept on Sleeping Dogs, it's time to wake up. It's got tight combat, a killer story, and a world that feels genuinely alive. One of the best crime dramas in gaming, hands down. Quantum Break. Quantum Break is one of those games that got overlooked by a lot of people, but if you're into story-driven action with a twist, this one's a hidden gem. It's a mix of third-person shooting, time manipulation, and a full-on live-action TV show integrated into the game. Sounds weird, right? But it actually works. You play as Jack Joyce, a guy who gets caught in a failed time experiment that gives him the ability to control time. From there, it's all about taking down enemies while bending time to your will. The time powers are what make the game special. You can stop time around enemies, dash across the battlefield, and even create time shields to block attacks. It's not just a gimmick either. Using these powers in combination with gunplay makes combat feel fresh. You're not just shooting, you're playing with time in a way that makes each fight feel like a puzzle. Pulling off a combo where you freeze a guy midair, then dash to another spot to take out his buddy is just satisfying. But what really makes Quantum Break stand out is the way it merges the game with a TV show. Between gameplay chapters, there are live action episodes that show you the other side of the story, mostly from the villain's perspective. And the cool part? The choices you make in the game change what happens in the show. It's a bold idea, and while it's not perfect, it gives the game a unique narrative experience you don't see often. The story is classic Remedy, with a lot of mind-bending twists and sci-fi elements. It's not as deep as Control or Alan Wake, but it's engaging, especially if you like time travel plots and the consequences that come with messing with the timeline. The only downside is that it can feel a little short, and the integration of the live-action show isn't for everyone. But if you're looking for an action game that tries something different and pulls it off in a cool way, Quantum Break is definitely worth your time. It's got slick combat, a solid story, and a style that's hard to forget. The Wolf Among Us.
All right, everyone.
The Wolf Among Us is easily one of Telltale's best and most underrated games. Set in the dark, gritty world of Fables, a comic book series where fairy tale characters live in the real world, you play as Bigby Wolf, the sheriff of Fabletown. And yeah, you guessed it, Bigby is the big bad wolf. But this isn't a cute fairy tale. It's a hard-boiled noir detective story with murder, corruption, and a dark underbelly of characters you thought you knew. The game is all about choices, and as Bigby, you have to decide how you're going to handle each situation. Do you go full wolf and let your temper fly, or try to be more diplomatic? Your decisions shape the way the story unfolds and how other characters react to you, and there's a real sense of consequence with every dialogue option. The cast of characters is fantastic: Snow White, the Woodsman, and more, all reimagined with a darker edge, and each interaction feels important. Visually, the game's comic book style art fits perfectly with the tone. It's dark, moody, and dripping with atmosphere. It feels like stepping into a noir graphic novel, and the setting of Fabletown, grimy and full of secrets, adds to that immersion. The Wolf Among Us might not have gotten as much attention as Telltale's Walking Dead, but it's easily one of their best works. If you like detective stories with a twist, characters that matter, and choices that leave an impact, this one is a must-play. And let's be real, who doesn't want to play as the big bad wolf solving murders? Enslaved Odyssey to the west. Now, Enslaved Odyssey to the West is one of those games that just didn't get enough love when it dropped, and I still don't understand why. Like, this is one of those hidden gems that you pick up years later and wonder how you missed it in the first place. Developed by Ninja Theory, yeah, the same team behind Hellblade. This game came out in 2010, but even now, it still holds up. It's got this post-apocalyptic world that's both gorgeous and grim, and at its heart, it's really all about the relationship between the two main characters, Monkey and Trip. The story is loosely based on Journey to the West, which, if you don't know, is this ancient Chinese novel with some really epic mythology, but the way Enslaved translates it to this futuristic setting is pretty unique. You play as Monkey, this tough-as-nails brute who's been captured by slavers. After a wild escape, he ends up tied literally thanks to a slave headband to Trip, a tech-savvy girl who needs his help to get back home. But the dynamic between the two is what makes the game so compelling. At first, Monkey's just doing it because he has no choice. The headband will kill him if he doesn't help her, but over time, they develop this really interesting, believable bond. What I love about Enslaved is how it blends action and storytelling. Monkey's this total badass in combat, jumping, climbing, smashing robots with his staff, but the game knows when to slow down and let the characters breathe. The dialogue between Monkey and Trip feels natural and human, even in the middle of all the chaos. Their relationship evolves in a way that just feels real, you know. They start out as strangers forced to work together, but by the end, there's genuine care and understanding between them. Ninja Theory's always been great at crafting character-driven stories, and Enslaved is no exception. And visually, man, this game is stunning for its time. The world is overgrown with nature, almost like a beautiful ruin. It's one of those post-apocalyptic settings that's more vibrant than dreary, which feels like a fresh take compared to all the dark, gray wastelands you usually get. The environments are massive and well-designed, so it feels like you're really traveling through this broken world. Plus, the platforming sections are fun. It's not super challenging, but it gives you that feeling of momentum as you leap and climb across these crazy structures. The combat, though, let's talk about that for a second. It's straightforward but satisfying. Monkey uses a staff to smash through waves of robots, and the combat feels weighty and impactful. There's a nice mix of melee and ranged attacks, so it doesn't get stale. Plus, Trip's not just a damsel in distress, she plays a real role in helping you out, using her tech skills to distract enemies or solve puzzles. It adds a little bit of strategy to the whole experience. Now, the one thing some people didn't love is that the game's a little on the short side, maybe 10 to 12 hours, but honestly, it's the kind of story that doesn't need to be dragged out. It's tight, focused, and by the time you hit the end, you're left with a really powerful narrative payoff. Speaking of which, the ending is one of those, whoa, didn't see that coming moments. I won't spoil it, but let's just say it leaves you thinking long after the credits roll. Tell me why.
Feels impossible.
Tell me, why is one of those narrative-driven games that hits you right in the feels? Coming from Dontnod, the same team behind Life is Strange, you know you're in for an emotional roller coaster. The game follows twins Tyler and Alison Ronan as they return to their childhood home in a small Alaskan town to unravel some deep, buried family secrets. What I really love about Tell Me Why is how it weaves the supernatural with the deeply personal. Tyler and Alison have this unique twin bond that lets them communicate telepathically, and you use that connection to piece together memories of their troubled past. The catch? Their memories don't always line up. That twist makes the storytelling fascinating because you're constantly choosing which version of events to believe, which directly impacts how their relationship and the story unfold.
Visions whenever we see or hear something really emotional.
The game's pacing is slower, but that's intentional. It's all about letting the characters and story breathe. You spend a lot of time exploring, talking, and making choices that feel significant not just in the moment, but for the characters' futures. In the town of Delos Crossing, where the game is set, is quiet and small, but it has this deep sense of history that feels almost like a character in itself. Every interaction feels meaningful, and you really get a sense of the weight the past has on these two characters. This isn't an action game, it's more about slow, thoughtful moments, where the dialogue choices and relationships matter way more than anything else. The small Alaskan town you explore feels like it's frozen in time, kind of quiet, kind of eerie, and full of history. The pacing is slow, sure, but that gives the characters room to grow. By the end, it's not just about uncovering family secrets, but about healing and moving forward. So, if you're into games that make you feel things and leave you thinking afterward, Tell Me Why is the one to check out. It's not long, but it packs a punch.
I can't do this. Stop!
Beyond Two Souls. Beyond Two Souls is one of those games that either clicks with you right away or leaves you scratching your head, but when it clicks, oh man, it really gets you. From Quantic Dream, the same team behind Heavy Rain, this game is all about narrative choices and, of course, emotional storytelling. You play as Jodie Holmes, a girl who's connected to this mysterious entity named Aiden. And honestly, that's what makes the gameplay so unique. You're not just controlling Jodie, but you also get to switch to Aiden, who's like this invisible supernatural force that can mess with the world around her. The game jumps between different parts of Jodie's life, so one minute she's a little girl trying to understand what's going on with her, and the next she's in full-on CIA action mode. It's a little all over the place in terms of pacing, but it keeps you hooked because you're constantly uncovering more of Jodie's story. The game's got that signature Quantic Dream choice system, where the decisions you make impact how things play out, but what I love about Beyond Two Souls is how personal it feels. Jodie's life is shaped by her connection to Aiden. Sometimes it's a blessing, sometimes it's a curse, and you feel that tension all the way through. The relationship between Jodie and Aiden is at the heart of the game, and it's so fascinating to see how it develops, especially since Aiden isn't exactly a regular sidekick. There's a lot of emotional weight to their bond, and the game makes sure you feel it. Now, this isn't a game for people looking for tons of action or complex mechanics. It's more about the narrative and the emotional journey, which is pretty much Quantic Dream's whole thing. You're here for the story, the characters, and those tough choices that sometimes don't have a right answer. And visually, it's gorgeous, especially for its time. The facial animations, the environments, it all adds to that cinematic feel. Beyond Two Souls might not be everyone's cup of tea, but if you're into deep, emotional storytelling with a supernatural twist, it's definitely worth a look. It's one of those games that sticks with you, especially because of its more intimate, character-driven focus. Plus, the whole life-spanning story structure keeps it fresh the entire way through. The Sinking City. The Sinking City is a weird, unsettling trip that sticks with you. It's like someone took a detective noir story, dumped it in Lovecraftian horror, and then set the whole thing in a city that's literally sinking into madness. You play as Charles Reed, a private investigator with a haunted past, trying to figure out what's going on in this decaying, half-flooded town of Oakmont. The deeper you dig, the crazier things get both in the city and in Reed's head. What really makes the Sinking City work is the atmosphere. Oakmont is is eerie in all the right ways. The streets are flooded, and there's this constant feeling of decay and isolation. It's not just the monsters that creep you out though, trust me, there are plenty of those, but the way the city itself feels alive in a really unsettling way. It's gloomy, it's weird, and it's not a place you'd want to hang out in yet. Somehow, you can't stop exploring it. The investigation mechanics are the real meat of the game. It's not like your typical follow the waypoint detective game. You actually have to piece together clues on your own, which feels way more rewarding. You'll be gathering evidence, connecting dots, and figuring out who or what is behind all these strange happenings. It's a refreshing take on detective work because it makes you feel like you're doing the heavy lifting rather than just being guided from point A to point B. Combat, though, can be a mixed bag. It's serviceable, but it's not what you come to the sinking city for. The monsters are gross, disturbing, and often hard to kill, which kind of adds to the tension. You don't feel like a superhero running around blasting through enemies. Instead, there's this constant sense that you're barely holding it together, which honestly fits the whole losing your sanity theme. It's not about being powerful, it's about surviving. What I dig most about this game is how it blends the detective stuff with the horror. It's not just about solving crimes or shooting monsters, it's about slowly losing your grip on reality. The more you uncover, the more you start questioning what's real and what's just a figment of Reed's unraveling mind. It's got that slow burn psychological horror vibe, and it works. The choices you make throughout the game can lead to different endings, and none of them are exactly a happy ending because, well, it's Lovecraft, you don't really get happy endings here. Murdered Soul Suspect. Murdered Soul Suspect is one of those games that had such a cool concept, but it flew under the radar for most people. You play as Ronan O'Connor, a detective in Salem, Massachusetts, who gets murdered at the start of the game. And yeah, that's where things get interesting. You're solving your own murder as a ghost. It's a neat setup, and from the get-go, it's got this eerie supernatural vibe mixed with a noir detective story, which makes for a pretty unique experience. The game is all about piecing together clues, and since you're a ghost, you've got some pretty interesting ways to do it. You can pass through walls, possess people to read their thoughts, and even mess with objects to influence what's going on in the world of the living. It's not a traditional detective game where you're just picking up evidence and interrogating people. Here, you're using ghostly abilities to uncover the truth. It sounds cool, and when it works, it really draws you in. But the game isn't all detective work. There are these creepy demons that show up and hunt you down, which forces you to sneak around and avoid getting caught. I won't lie, these sections can be a little clunky, but they add some tension to an otherwise slow burn investigation. The best part of Murdered Soul Suspect is the setting. Salem is packed with history, and the game leans hard into the whole witch trials vibe. You're walking around this haunted town, seeing the echoes of both past and present. There's something cool about solving a murder while also uncovering the secrets of a place so tied to paranormal lore. The atmosphere here is spot on. It's got that spooky, small-town mystery feel that keeps you engaged. Overall, Murdered Soul Suspect might not be a groundbreaking detective game, but it's got enough charm and uniqueness to make it worth checking out, especially if you're into supernatural mysteries. It's a short experience, but if you're in the mood for a ghostly whodunit that's more about atmosphere and storytelling than hardcore action, it's worth a look. Ryse Son of Rome. Ryse Son of Rome is like stepping into the middle of a big budget Roman epic. Right from the start, you know what you're getting into: flashy, brutal combat, and a whole lot of look how cool this is moments. You're Marius Titus, a Roman soldier who's seen some serious stuff, and after your family is murdered, you're out for blood. The story is simple, classic revenge stuff, but it's the way it's presented that makes it feel larger than life. First off, the game is gorgeous. Even years after release, Ryse still holds up as one of the most visually stunning games. Ancient Rome, the battles, the way the light hits your armor, it's just dripping with atmosphere. The attention to detail is insane. Like, every scene is meant to be a screenshot. You're in the middle of these massive battles, and it feels like you're in a Hollywood movie set, with all the chaos and grandeur you'd expect. Combat, though that's that's where things get interesting. It's all about timing your attacks, stringing together combos, and landing these brutal cinematic executions that make every fight feel satisfying. But I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, the combat can get repetitive. You're basically doing variations of the same thing throughout the game / block, execute, repeat. It's fun, especially early on when you're just enjoying the flow of it, but after a while it can feel like you're going through the motions. That said, those execution animations never get old. They're over the top and make you feel like a total beast. What really sets Ryse apart is how it handles the big battles. You're not just out there swinging a sword, you're leading troops, commanding formations, and strategizing in the heat of combat. There's this sense of scale that few games capture so well. You feel like a cog in this massive Roman war machine, and it's honestly a lot of fun. There are moments when you're leading a charge, shield up soldiers at your back, and you can't help but feel like a total boss. The game does a great job of making you feel powerful without drowning you in complicated mechanics. And then there's the story. It's not reinventing the wheel, but it's got all the drama and intrigue you'd expect from a Roman setting. Marius' journey is packed with betrayal, political maneuvering, and enough twists to keep things interesting. It's kind of like watching one of those historical action films where you already know the beats, but you're still along for the ride because it's so damn fun. Plus, they throw in some Roman mythology and divine intervention just to keep things spicy. So, if you're looking for something deep and strategic, Ryse might leave you wanting more. But if you're craving a game that makes you feel like a Roman badass and looks incredible while doing it, this is the one to pick up. It's pure, stylish fun, and sometimes that's all you really need. Max Payne 3. Alright, let's talk about Max Payne 3, the game that took everyone's favorite hard-drinking, pill-popping, slow-motion diving ex-cop and threw him straight into the chaos of Sao Paulo. If you're looking for a game that's gritty, fast-paced, and absolutely drenched in bullet time, this is the one. Max has been through some serious stuff over the years, and in Max Payne 3 he's not exactly doing much better. He's older, more bitter, and yeah, still downing pills and whiskey like it's water. But what makes this game great is that it doesn't shy away from Max's broken state. He's not your clean-cut hero, he's a guy who's just trying to make it through the day without getting killed or falling deeper into his own misery. It's a bit darker, a little more depressing, but in that Max Payne way that just works. Now, let's get into the action because man, this is where Max Payne 3 shines. The gunplay is chef's kiss good, it's slick, it's intense, and most importantly, it's all about that sweet, sweet bullet time. You'll be diving through the air in slow motion, dodging bullets and picking off enemies like you're starring in your own action movie. There's just something so satisfying about nailing headshots while everything slows down around you. It never gets old, and Rockstar made sure it feels smooth as butter. The game's set in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and honestly, it's a bit of a departure from the gritty New York streets we're used to seeing Max in. But it works. The favelas, the nightclubs, the luxury high-rises, they all bring a fresh vibe to the series. And Rockstar nailed the look and feel of the setting, making it feel alive and dangerous. Every shootout feels like a scene out of a movie, and the level of detail in the environments just adds to that cinematic feel. But it's not just about looking good. The story, while more straightforward than the previous games, is still packed with that classic Max Payne noir vibe. Max is hired as a bodyguard for some wealthy folks, and surprise, everything goes horribly wrong. You've got betrayals, corruption, and Max's signature voiceovers that are as cynical as ever. It's like being in a dark, twisted action flick, but with way more emotional baggage. If you're a fan of stylish, intense shooters with a good story and a protagonist who's just as messed up as the situations he gets into, Max Payne 3 is absolutely worth your money. It's got some of the best gunplay you'll find, a gritty narrative that pulls no punches, and of course more slow motion diving than you'll know what to do with. Just don't forget to pop a few painkillers along the way, Max certainly doesn't. Shadow Warrior 3. This is perhaps one of my favorite underrated hack-and-slash games. I'm so glad that my friend recommended me this game. I remember asking him about some thrilling, fun games with less focus on the story, and I can confirm that Shadow Warrior 3 didn't disappoint me. You have got an awesome main character who likes to make jokes and even some cool punchlines. From start to finish, you'll see his hilarious side that will get you hooked. What makes the game stand out is the combat. I totally love how you play as one-man army beast with some of the coolest weapons and powers. Your only goal is to move forward while slashing through waves of enemies. You can blast enemies, torn them apart, stomp them, shoot them with a variety of guns, and of course, how can we forget the parkour-like movements? It's always amazing to see our character run and wall jump seamlessly. It really gives you a feeling that you're this fast-paced machine whose only purpose is to kill and fulfill the mission. Also, I would like to mention that there are 2 prequels as well. So, if you like the third one, then try the prequels as well. They are surely outdated in terms of graphics, but you're still gonna have the same old Shadow Warrior type of fun. The second part is a must-play as it features balanced graphics, gameplay, and combat. You can still have an awesome time playing the second part in 2024. Anyways, no need worry about the connectivity as all these games are kind of standalone, which means that you won't miss anything. So start your journey with the third or second Shadow Warrior. Infamous Second Son. Infamous Second Son turns 10 this year, and it's a great time to look back at this gem of an open world game. Launched in 2014, it was a PlayStation 4 launch title that managed to show off the new console's capabilities in some pretty impressive ways. In this game, you step into the shoes of Delsin Rowe, a guy who suddenly discovers he has superpowers. Delsin's abilities are all about controlling different elements, smoke, neon, and video, among others. Each power has its own set of moves and perks, which makes gameplay really diverse and engaging. Plus, the visual effects when you're using these powers are nothing short of stunning. The story is set in a near future Seattle, and while it does tread some familiar superhero territory, government conspiracies, moral dilemmas, and the whole with great power comes great responsibility shtick, it's done with a lot of style. Delsin is a pretty interesting protagonist with a mix of charm and rebelliousness that keeps things entertaining. And the game gives you choices that actually matter, affecting how the story unfolds and how characters react to you. The open world of Seattle is not just a backdrop but a playground. Climbing walls, running across rooftops, and using your powers to navigate the city make for a dynamic experience. The side missions are pretty fun, and there's a lot to do if you like collecting stuff and exploring. Graphically, Infamous Second Son was a stunner back in the day, showcasing the PS4's power with detailed environments and flashy effects. The soundtrack and voice acting are also top-notch, adding to the overall immersive experience. Overall, Infamous Second Son holds up well after a decade. It's a fun ride with great powers, a solid story, and an impressive open world to explore. If you're into superhero games or just looking for a good time with some cool powers, this one's worth checking out. Sunset Overdrive. Alright, so let's talk about Sunset Overdrive, a game that kind of came and went, but is definitely worth a second look. Imagine if Ratchet Clank and a hyperactive punk rock concert had a baby, and you get this wild ride. It's like the developers took every cool idea they had, threw it into a blender, and then hit the hyper button. The game's set in a vibrant, over-the-top city where a disastrous energy drink has turned everyone into freaky mutants, and oh boy, the mutants are just the start. You're a part of this quirky gang of survivors trying to make the best of a bad situation. The storytelling is cheeky and full of attitude, not taking itself too seriously, which is a breath of fresh air. Gameplay-wise, it's all about speed and style. You're grinding on rails, bouncing off walls, and shooting with a flare that makes you feel like the coolest superhero ever. It's not just about moving fast, it's about moving with personality. The game's combat and traversal systems are a joy to master, and the sheer variety of weapons keeps things spicy. There's a real joy in finding just the right weapon for a particular batch of mutants, and trust me, there are some wacky options. The city itself is a playground with a ton of side missions and collectibles to keep you busy if you want. The world's a little chaotic and maybe a bit overwhelming at times, but that's part of the charm. You get to embrace the chaos and have a blast doing it. Honestly, Sunset Overdrive is one of those games where you just kind of have to let yourself go and enjoy the ride. It might not have set the world on fire when it first came out, but it's got a personality and an energy that's hard to ignore. If you missed it the first time around, give it a shot. It's a fun, offbeat adventure that deserves more love. Well everyone, that was all for this video. I really hope you enjoyed my list. I was getting many comments about mentioning some underrated games and those that I haven't really talked a lot about before. So here you go. Now make sure to subscribe and leave a like. I would really appreciate that. Have a good day and I will see you in the next video.